Well, Janine, thank you so much for being here today. So excited for our conversation. Your work is in a such an interesting area. Um America on Tech. Why don't you just start off by sharing a little bit about America on Tech, your mission, and then your role with regard to fundraising?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Drew. Really appreciate being here. So America on Tech is a national tech talent pipeline. We essentially equip students with the skills to be able to pursue careers in technology. And we do that by not just providing the skills, providing them with the supports and resources to make sure that they're building those pathways for themselves.
Here. And talk a little bit about in your role, how do you see that? What are some of your kind of key goals, metrics, things you're focused on,
Sure.
your responsibilities?
So I am the VP of development, and so I oversee our private revenue strategy. So that's revenue streams across to support our programming and our work across all of our regions.
Sure, sure. Um, Now you've worked at a number of nonprofits, including City Year, Communities in School, Mouse, and Harlem RBI. What key lessons have you learned about fundraising kind of across these various organizations? We were talking right before we started about your background it's almost like the perfect uh, kind of background for your current role.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So I'll say the key lesson that I've learned is the importance of sustainable systems. We know how often, just it's just a reality of the sector. Development talent, they have a shorter lifespan compared to perhaps in roles in other teams. And so because of that, it's really important to make sure that the systems and the tools that we're using are ones that are sustainable past an actual individual. And oftentimes, like information related to donor engagement lives in the heads of the individuals that are stewarding those relationships, and how important it is to put it in a way that can be easily understood across teams, across years, across time, and that's really what I've learned. It's just building out sustainable systems and strategies to support growth year over year.
I love that. Such a critical area. Do you have an example, perhaps, or example or two of sort of strategies you've used to do that?
Absolutely. I would say that, one particular sentiment that I've heard often that really guides me is just this idea that hope is not a strategy. And so oftentimes, we're so inspired by our missions. We do really great work and we hope that someone else will be inspired to support the work that we're doing. And so I think that the way that I have sort of like taken the inspiration that we feel in our work and put it into a strategy is by being able to build out a strong fund development plan. But really, it's a livable document, not something that you invest time and you put it on a bookshelf and let it collect dust. It is really something that is a living, breathing document that considers a number of different things. One of the things it may consider is doing a look back. So the look back is, how have we behaved in these revenue streams across the past 3 years?
Sure.
A look at the present, right? What currently has changed, or what is different, or what is the same? And then doing a look forward, right? Well, where do we want to be on impact? How might we be able to position a different story and engaging those different partners that able to move us along? And part of that is really important because it forces us to ask really difficult questions. So if you're trying to grow your corporate strategy to be, let's just say, 1 million, and your past 3 years you've raised 100,000, I'd be curious to know, like, did something change in the current moment that created an environment that you think that is achievable? And if there's not any new data points to support that, it sort of leads to the hope, right? And we hope that the new corporate partners we talk to will see that we're doing great work, and that's where, like, I would ask more like sort of metrics. Well, tell me a little bit more. Like, what are we doing different? to make sure we're making those connections. Maybe you expanded your board to have like, brand new corporate leaders that have already expressed that they're going to support and rally around that growth. And that's different. Then that can be possible, right?
Sure.
It's still a stretch goal, but it's possible. So that's sort of like how I would move from going to just like a hopeful vision, but really putting some metrics together and asking questions, do a look back, a look at the current assessment, and then a look forward.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I mean, really, really good. Um, is thinking back on maybe one of your prior uh area, jobs, was there a place where you were able to do that and this kind of really came to life, the sustainable system? Now, let's say after you're no longer there.
Yeah, I would say that I'm so grateful that part of my earlier, works was at Harlem RPI, where I actually have built the discipline to be able to think that way. And so it was a very systems oriented and also very like successful organization that was had a growth mindset year over year. So I would say that because that was something that I was introduced to very early in my career and I saw the successes of it, when I entered other organizations and I didn't see that, it was very easy to introduce a new way of thinking, but it also just, requires a different way of behaving and also like being in alignment with that like change and that shift because
Sure.
it does require like new systems, new tools, a new way of talking about the work, thinking about the work. And so I would say that, just to be managing expectations is that you're not going to roll out a brand new version of the work in year one.
Sure.
I think that there was even moments where I was in certain organizations, for example, where I would open up dialogue with our board members about fundraising, and they were not happy that I was asking them about their fundraising goals. And it was something where when I was at the previous organization, it was a norm that we talked about fundraising all the time. And so those are examples where you also have to do a reality check of your current environment and also say, okay, well, what are the things that we could change and not feel frustrated when you feel like, well, it's very clear that that is a role of a board member and that these conversations will happen.
Sure. 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 You recently led a cohort of nonprofit leaders who are not necessarily fundraisers. These were experts in terms of their programs, in terms of their mission. Tell us a little bit about that, and how did you approach that? What were some of the insights that came out of that?
Sure. So I would say that at the start of the engagement, I asked everyone to take a short like quiz or prompt, responsive prompt of where they were sort of at with their feelings about fundraising. And I would say the sentiments was pretty consistent in that it was fearful, it was not the unknown, it was this big mystery, not sure how to like engage. A lot of them were, I believe, in program backgrounds. And so they were leaders, and of course, even program team members like also play a role, of course, in fundraising, but it was something that was not their specialization. And so not really knowing where to start, but knowing that it was important. And so, through that time, we really talked through steps in how to sort of like get past that. And one tool that I also introduced the cohort to is AI, artificial intelligence. And working at a tech nonprofit, we do have to be really cutting edge and innovative and really connected with the current climate of tech and being able to make sure that we're introducing those tools for our students and those skill sets, but also as an organization, how are we adopting AI to improve our own efficiencies and our own work? And so as part of the training, I walked the team through like what some of the questions, like what were they were trying to accomplish. And we leverage AI tools to be able to provide solid and clear sort of like guidelines of how to think about advancing some of those steps. And
Ah,
by the time we, really like got past the 4 month engagement, it was just really exciting to be able to see there was so much enthusiasm and excitement around fundraising. And part of it was, just removing the fears by being able to just address them head on and being okay with being uncomfortable and saying, I don't know what it looks like to build a strong individual given plan. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how to start a strong like gala plan. And I don't know how to, I don't know. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
And being able to, leverage AI to say those things. Hey, I'm building a fundraising event. Where might I start? What should I think about? And knowing that that can support you with at least having a starting point. And that's where I think that, it was really helpful to be able to introduce that to the leaders, to be able to know that just getting past their own fears and just naming it in a safe environment really allowed them to be able to have more clarity in advance of their work.
Love that. So good. So good. There's an expression, name it to tame it. And such power in that, addressing the fear, right? Rather than sort of suppressing it, perhaps, or pretending it isn't there. So good. Um, let's switch over and talk a little bit about the work you're doing right now at America on Tech and the plan you're building there. And as you look into the future, what do you see as sort of the key elements of your fundraising development strategy, Janine?
Sure. I mean, I think that one of the things is, and it's just also my belief with any goals, is that um, it's just really the slow and steady and just the consistency, right? Sometimes in development teams, and I know I've seen this before, is we're always having everything thrown at us, right? And so we're like, okay, we said we were going to do these things, and now we're doing all of these things,
Sure.
right? And so, like, and that's totally, I get that. But I think that being able to have a strong fund development plan at the beginning, that serves as your anchor where you say, how does that advance our individual given strategy if we do this? How
Sure.
does that advance our corporate given if we go that way instead, right? We said all of these things that we were going to do, and so after we build out a fund development plan at AOT, really part of it is just moving through the pipeline, moving through it, just being disciplined and just going through it every week, making sure, like we said, we're going to do these things. We said we're going to take these steps, and just making sure there's accountability, to be able to make sure, well, did we do those things? And if we didn't, let's have a conversation. What happened?
Sure.
And if you need to redirect, that's fine, but making sure that you're sort of like doing the things that you said, um, and holding each other accountable. So again, like going back to the earlier sort of point about setting goals, right? You know what your goals are. And if you're primarily funded by whether it's, grant foundations or corporate or individuals, and once you set your goal, if you say, I'm going to schedule 3 meetings with major donor prospects, you know, the conversations that should be having, the accountability is, okay, well, who are they? And that's part of the continuing to move forward. And that by the end of the month, you did not schedule them, there should be a conversation. Well, what happened? And if you were redirected in a different priority, that's fine. But then just did that advance the goal in a different way?
Sure.
And just being able to kind of continue to go back to the plan. This is what we said. What happened? I think that's really important. And that's what I mean about the live working doc. It's
Yeah.
not something you build and you put in a shelf, because if you do that, then it was just a waste of time. But making sure that it's live and working, that it spells out quarterly benchmarks, monthly goals, weekly tasks, and that way you can make sure that you continue to just keep moving it forward.
So good.
And that's what we're doing. And that's what we're doing in our work.
Talk a little bit about, uh, knowing a little bit about your organization. I'm sure corporate sponsorships and gifts are a key element, individual giving, event-based fundraising events. Um, uh, Talk a little bit about some of the individual pieces and how you're approaching them.
Sure. So I'll speak to it through the lens of AI. Since I think that that may be the most valuable for your audience, that may be something that may or may not be doing. So for instance, let's just say you're planning a fundraising event, right? And let's just say you're thinking about like, okay, well, what is the theme for the event? You can leverage AI to say, hey, this year happens to be our 20th anniversary. What might you suggest being a theme? And AI can share out a few themes very quickly, whereas previously in other orgs I've worked at, it was a process that would take 3 months. You hire a Marcom consultant, they present the ideas, they collect environments to be able to gather feedback and information. They share that back out, you make a choice, and it can be a very long process. So leveraging AI, you can ask it, hey, we're celebrating 20 years. What might you suggest? You don't have to do what is the what's generated by AI. You
Sure.
can say, and you can also say, actually, I like option two. Let's make a few additional changes, right? After you do that, you can also take let's just say the theme that you choose, you can say, okay, can you now create a run of show for the event that incorporates a heartfelt moment aligned with our mission and make it in a 2 hour program, for example. It can do that with theme.
Sure.
And then you can say, can you now build out a social media strategy where we're amplifying, the event coming up, where we're talking about it in a really special, compelling way? What might you suggest? We're going to start the campaign in a 3-month timeline leading up to the event. It can give you an entire campaign for you to consider, along with the theme that you created. So that's just one example of how you can feed it different information around planning of one event. You're not including information that is sensitive that you wouldn't be feeding. Like obviously we wouldn't be putting in donor private information.
Sure.
We wouldn't be putting any of those things. You're literally putting in just very like broad information that's public information, and you could use your name of your nonprofit or not. It's up to you. Like that's up to you to determine what you want to do. And the name of your nonprofit is already in a public space. So if you put the name of the nonprofit, it will pull up history from your nonprofit that it pulls up in the consideration of your theme as well. So that's an example of how we might use like AI to be able to like leverage like building out a special event. So that's just one example. But I want to just pause here. Any questions? I can go to another revenue stream of what that could look like.
I mean, that is really good, and I think super clear and super helpful. Yeah. What is kind of how would you then maybe take that approach into either corporate or individual giving?
Yeah, so same thing. It's you can say, okay, like I want to build same thing. And the first thing I forgot to mention, one of the things that's also helpful that you also might want to start is set the persona, right? And so what set the persona means is, let's just say I want to build out the individual giving strategy. I might say set the persona of the director of individual giving. And so now it's thinking as a director of individual. It doesn't mean you have to have a person who's the director of individual giving on your team. You're creating a persona of someone who's the director of individual giving. In the prior example, it would be set the persona of the director of special events,
Sure.
right? So as a director of individual giving, set the persona. You have a persona, and so sometimes they'll even give you a name. Let's just call her Beth. Hey Beth, I like to create, as you would with a direct report, perhaps someone on your team. Hey, I like to create an individual given strategy. I like to separate an annual fund from a major donor strategy. What might you suggest? So you can start so basic. And again, it depends on where you're at, because if you are just starting it, you might ask very basic questions like, where do I start?
Sure.
If you already have one established, you might ask, hey, we've been growing it every year by 5%. We'd like to make a significant growth to our major gift strategy. What suggestions might you offer that could help us grow from 5% annually to maybe like 20% annually if we focus our efforts? What might you suggest? So AI will deliver some suggestions, and then you can take them or adjust them. Generate new prompts based on what they fed, what the responses were. And so that's how you might be able to do that. But you need to be clear, like with your prompts, and you need to be also patient that like, oh, I like that, not so much that, let's edit that. The same way you would do with a member of your team, right? You would give them feedback saying, hey, that's great. Actually make some adjustments, make some edits. You would speak to them as it was an additional member of your team. And that's a way to add capacity. So that's an example. Another example with the annual fund, it's, hey, I wanted to be able to build out a, you know, an annual fund campaign, and we plan on having two campaigns, an end of year campaign that's pretty common one in nonprofits.
Sure.
And we want it to be and also one additional campaign. So choose a season in your like timeline that you want to build the campaign. Can you build out some things that I should be thinking about right now, or can you build out like an annual plan of things that I should be doing, considering the campaign will be in December for the end of the year, and then pick the month for whatever the other one is, right? And so AI can be able to help you like provide some guidance and some structure and build it all out. And if you actually have something that you've done in prior years and you said, hey, this is what we did last year for our annual campaign, what suggestions might you have to enhance it? You could also feed it that. So that way it'll maybe offer some additional recommendations based on what you've done in the past. So that's how you can continue to grow it and ask it to just enhance what you've done. But if you've never done it, you can just say, ask it just to create it.
So good. So good. Um, let's go back and talk. You mentioned earlier the role of boards in fundraising, and obviously just a key part almost of every nonprofit strategy. How do you see that in your role? The role of the board, perhaps onboarding new board members, having those development conversations with board members. How do you approach that?
Well, I'll speak to more broadly, but I think that one thing that I'll say is that is very common in nonprofits in general that I've spoken with is sometimes there's a lack of clarity of communicating to the board what their roles are. And I think that that's really like just the first step in just board engagement. And also there's a lack of clarity between the boards and staff. And so in some organizations, sometimes they do operate as an extension of staff because of capacity. In other like organizations, there's a distinction between board roles versus staff roles and staff decisions. And so I think that just making sure that you know where you fall in with regards to like how you want the board to engage in and which organization and what are the distinctions between that. But oftentimes I've seen that there's a lack of clarity. And the other part is when looking for new board members, let's just say you're looking for a strong fundraising board member. And so you've identified a few, you're bringing them on, and there's just sort of this expectation that they're just going to fundraise because they have capacity to fundraise. And they don't. And then there's like sort of like a disappointment. And I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
And so I think part of that is really, well, where's the communication piece? And so coincidentally, that was one of the specific goals that one of the members of the cohort wanted to expand on. It was really evolving a non-fundraising board to a fundraising board by being able to bring on like new fundraising board members. And so, we again leverage AI to be able to say how might we do that. And some considerations are, how might we consider bring in a fundraising board member when that is not the expectations for other board members that are currently on the board? What are some questions we may want to consider? What are some thoughts that you might want to suggest to us? So making sure that all of the consideration, like you should be asking it before you're starting to move forward, is really important. And then making sure that the board members, as they're coming on, making sure that they're obviously very connected with the mission, but they're also very connected with the expectations, and they're also connected with very much with the timing of engagements and expectations throughout the year. So if there's an expectation that we're going to have 100% board participation at the end of your campaign, you should probably say that when you're bringing them on.
Right.
If there's an expectation that there's 100% board engagement at a particular volunteer event, then that has to be communicated like very early on. And so I think the communication piece is the really most important piece, and making sure that at the start that they're being onboarded, and then also making sure that there's both a collective goal across the board. So as a board body, as a governing body, these are the things that we're like looking to do. But then as an individual board member, these are my specific goals that I'm going to accomplish and support the organization. within my current resources and network. So I think that having those two conversations as a collective, as individuals, and then also making sure that there's spaces to be able to have just conversations. And the accountability is also not necessarily like in school, like you're getting a grade, but it's really just like, hey, maybe things change, maybe that was your intention to show up in these ways, and then life happened, and this is something I can no longer give time, and that's okay too. But I think having just conversations and having open dialogue is really important. But setting the expectations from the beginning is really, really important. And AI can really help with that if you're not sure where to start.
I love that. So good. So good. Building on that, you've spoken about the importance of bringing uncomfortable conversations to the forefront to build and strengthen relationships. Um, do you want to, share a little bit of your philosophy around that?
Around uncomfortable conversations,
Yes. Yeah.
I'm just curious to know because I feel like uncomfortable conversations can be a number of different things. Is there a specific
Well, that was just one thing I think that came up in the research that I think you had spoken about. So you could really take it
okay.
anywhere you want it.
So I'll say this, and maybe because there's often I think that what I've also heard, and I'll say specifically from those who do not have fundraising backgrounds, it can be even more uncomfortable. But I think it's also, when you're in these roles and you're a frontline fundraiser, you're speaking to a lot of different individuals who have a number of different backgrounds, experiences, that may or may not be something that are similar to your own. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable.
Sure.
And so I think that that's, in this work, that's just a norm. And for me, I think, I've always taken the approach of just curiosity and being able to like want to just like learn more, and then find alignment. And then sometimes there is no alignment, or maybe like, and also knowing that expression may look and feel different depending on a person's background as well. We may be caring about the same things, but talking about them in a different way, and being able to be curious to learn and try to understand what a person is trying to say, as opposed to, feeling a certain kind of way if they're not saying it in the way that you might say.
Right.
So for me, like this work is just can definitely allow for moments of that one might feel uncomfortable and a moment of discomfort. But I think it's for me, I think it's just like understanding that like everyone's not coming from the same places that we come from, and that it's there's a way to be able to still have your own self dignity in those moments, but also be able to take a different approach and mindset to be curious, to want to learn.
You're here. You're here. One area that's really interesting to me is the power of stories and storytelling. Um, don't capturing donor stories, telling the story of the nonprofit. Do you have any thoughts, ideas on the power of storytelling to raise money?
Yeah, I would say that I definitely, for me, feel it's really important as the base framing, right? And I think that's definitely very aligned with our ethos. We have, for example, we work with some incredibly talented students who, in a short time together, in being surrounded in like our boot camp, our 3 week boot camp, they just really show like just incredible results in their learning in such a short period of time. And I think that being able to celebrate that, as opposed to, talking about circumstances that different individuals may be coming from, I think that that's not really a way that I necessarily approach storytelling. I know there's certain organizations that they may in fact take those approaches, but I would say for me, storytelling is, you want to celebrate the great work in your communities and your organizations, and if you work in healthcare, like the patients like stories as well, and not the sort of like the hardships and the harder moments. And so I think that that's where for me, storytelling can also be really proud moments where you're seeing how just investing in the work that you're doing can be really like celebrated and special.
Love that. Love that. Um, in previous roles, Janine, you've talked about or you've successfully expanded government funding, securing major gifts. What strategies have you found most effective to achieve these results?
Well, I would say definitely making sure that you're tailoring your messages for the audience that you're talking to. So, for example, as a national organization, we do work across different regions, serve different, and every region has their own distinctness to them. And so in city council funding that I oversaw, for instance, they very much care about their districts. And you can be talking about your impact a block away, but if it's not their districts, like that's not their priority. Their focus and their priority is to districts. And so I remember during that time when I was overseeing that particular expansion work, and government funding and it can be a little bit more trickier, right? City council funding, public revenue, it's not stable funding, but it was significant for us at that time. And
Sure.
so I remember it was during a time when we were expanding to like a new market. We were like growing, we were doing a number of things, and that was the pitch we were walking into for our communications with one of our corporate partners. And I was like, well, that's not the right pitch for city council. We need to talk about the school by name in their district. We need to talk about the names of the principals in their district. We need to talk about just the very local, hyper local information. That's what we need to lead with. Like in your district, we serve 20 schools. That included a total of 100 students in your district. Even if your reach is 10,000 students, that is not the sort of like the tagline, the theme for that conversation. It is your district, 20 students or 20 schools, 100 students. That is the impact. And so I think that by being able to make sure, and I guess we call that donor segmentation and making sure that you're like tailoring that, but that's how we were able to do that. And I know that it takes more time to do that because you have to make sure that that strong alignment happens, and every city council member has different priorities. Like being able to also know, we work with the Marcom team to say, hey, what have they been posting about recently? What are they talking about? Oh, they just
Sure.
invested in new technology. They just supported this, like making sure we're bringing all of those conversations. And by doing that, we were able to really reach record breaking numbers in our goals towards city council funding. And it was really exciting, but it was really just, again, I always talk about in the most simplest terms, like when you're talking to like a relative or a friend, right? I'm not saying the same things to my mom that I'm saying when I'm talking to my partner or my best friend. And it's not because I'm not being authentic with my mom. It's just that I would lose her interest very fast if I'm talking to her in the same ways I'm talking to these different individuals, right? And so I think that that's the part, like when thinking about it, when you think about your own self, you do slightly tailor your messages and what you're sharing to different audiences. So it's the same thing. I will bore my mom to death if I had to talk to her about everything that I'm doing. So it's just, again, so with your donors, it's the same way. They're, individuals, whether they're corporate, individual, foundation, public revenue, it doesn't matter. It's still like people and entities who have values, and you just need to find what the alignment is and what the connection is and be authentic and you're talking about it.
So good. So good. Last question. Um, what would be your advice to somebody entering into a development role, entering into the fundraising world? Um, what are some things they should think about, focus on, in order to be successful?
I can't emphasize enough like our current climate of leveraging technology to advance your work. And, you know, whether you're new to the sector or whether you've been doing this for a really long time, how you can leverage the current tools to really add capacity to your work will make you stay passionate about the mission and the work because you're able to spend more time like really inspiring um you know your community and your audience. So I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, I know like how much times sometimes we spend doing like thinking work or deep work, and sometimes it can be overwhelming, it can be frustrating, we may feel like we don't have enough capacity. So I cannot emphasize enough that like leveraging the technologies, leveraging AI, it will really be so additive.
Love that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Janine, for sharing. I thought this was really, really interesting in many ways, and I love what you're doing with AI. And everybody's or you hear about AI, people are talking about AI, but you're really kind of taking it and putting it right into your work and into your team's work and your organization's work. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thanks.